Welcome everyone.
Thank you for coming out to Mappy Hour. We're so excited to be here at Filson tonight, and if you see these guys around, thank them so much. This space is awesome. Really great to have the Sierra Nevada beer. Really excited about that. And really glad you guys are all here. So for those of you who don't know why you're here or have never been to Mappy Hour before, we are a happy hour for people who live in the city and love the outdoors. So we're here to connect you to other people who love the outdoors, to expose you to new ways to experience nature in the outdoors in the city, and hopefully to help you meet some new adventure buddies so you can get out there and do the things you love to do. I'm Alex, I'm one of your DC chapter leaders, and I'm super excited to introduce the new DC team. We have Kate to my right, Sarah, and Mike. We are your DC Mappy Hour team. Any questions you have, any ideas, any things you want to see, you want to do, come let us know and we will try to make it happen. And with that, I will turn it over to Sarah to talk about some of our upcoming events.
Yeah, so coming up in March, we've got a comedy hour featuring Alex, who's here tonight.
An hour?
TBD on timing, apparently. In April, we've got a Women in the Outdoors panel, so stay tuned for things on that.
Over the summer, we're having 4 boat rides. So Trey is hooking us up with the Anacostia Riverkeepers. We're doing 1 a month, and so the sign-ups are going to be with Mike afterwards. We don't know where he's going to be, so it's a bit of a scavenger hunt. There's only 20 spots for each boat ride.
I'll be right up here.
Okay. There's 20 spots for each boat ride, so you can sign up early and sign up tonight, and it's 1 a month from May through August. Yeah.
So with that, we're super excited to be talking about the Anacostia tonight, and we're excited to have Trey from Anacostia Riverkeeper to tell us a little bit more about the river and some of the projects there. So without further ado, Trey, welcome up.
Thank you.
So my name is Trey Sherard. I'm the outreach coordinator and biologist at Anacostia Riverkeeper and tonight's wine bartender. Is that what you wanted me to be?
That's exactly
Perfect. So I'm going to talk quickly about kind of a variety of fun spring things that we've got going on, looking into summer things. And then I'm going to talk in great detail and then Q&A me as far as you like about citizen science and especially looking for bacteria in the water, looking towards making the river swimmable, getting it pronounced swimmable, and documenting that kind of work. So Anacostia Riverkeeper is a small nonprofit. We're one of a lot of nonprofits that start with Anacostia. The Anacostia runs through mostly DC, although most of the watershed is actually in Maryland. 5/6 of the watershed is in Prince George's County and Montgomery County. Only 1/6 is in DC, but 7 of the 8.5 river miles run through DC. DC, there's a nonprofit for everything. In some cases, there's 5 nonprofits for everything. And so there's lots of work to be done. There's lots of us doing that work. Anacostia Riverkeeper does trash cleanups. We work with people like Emma, who you can ask about trash cleanups, and Surfrider DC in general. We do a lot of stormwater management work in DC and in the counties in Maryland. We do a lot of outreach. You guys might have just heard about the boat tours that are going out. If you have groups of your own 21 friends that you want to get on a boat, you don't need to rely on trying to book quickly tonight to map out the Mappy Hour tour. You can book your own tour with me directly. I'll be available all night, and you guys can ask me for my contact information. What's new is that we're adding this water quality monitoring. So at the end of 2017, in the fall, Anacostia Riverkeeper had heard about Swim Guide, which is an app started by Lake Ontario Waterkeeper, which is now Swim, Drink, Fish, and Lake Ontario. They started an app which they were using just to manage their data for bacterial water quality monitoring all around Lake Ontario. And they were using this app to manage that data internally. And then they realized that the internet is really cool. And so then they just opened it up to other places. And then it became North America only, Canada, US, Mexico. Now, last time I checked, and that was a couple months ago, I think they're in 6,000 or 7,000 beaches, different sites, pinpoints on their map in the app, in about 7 different countries. And they're constantly looking for more. So most people in DC are not from DC. If back home or somewhere you went to grad school or somewhere you went to undergrad, might have groups that you know that are taking bacterial water quality data. Feel free to put them in touch with SwimGuide. It's a free platform. They even help us monetize it, which is gold for nonprofits because we are always looking for money. We're a small staff because we need lots of money. We're only 2 full-time people and a couple part-time people. So that SwimGuide app is really cool because it's a free platform. It allows us to sell advertising on the sites. So we have different sponsors for a couple of the different sites. So in 2017, we did an out-of-pocket pilot. That out-of-pocket pilot, we just did a handful of sites a handful of times. We used a friend of a friend of a friend at the Anne Arundel Community College lab. They were giving us an at-cost price for running the samples. That was a proof of concept. That allowed us to have data to post onto SwimGuide, and then that allowed us to go for other grants. So we've been working for going on 7 years now with Gallaudet University in D.C. They've been doing their own water quality monitoring program using our boats and their undergrad students to take water samples. And they've been running it through their lab mostly for nutrients, so looking at nitrogen, phosphorus, but a little bit deeper than just total nitrogen and total phosphorus. They also split up the nitrogen, so they look at nitrate, nitrite, ammonia, ammonium. And then they've also been looking at the phytoplankton, the algae assemblage. So they're getting a biochemical view, and they've got going into their 7th year with us next month. We'll actually start sampling with them again. They wrote us into a Maryland Sea Grant 2 years ago. And that portion of that grant that they funded us for, paid for the equipment, the capital equipment that we needed to make that program become in-house. So Waterkeeper Alliance, of which we're a member, has a deal with a company called IDEX. Waterkeeper Alliance members get a discount on IDEX equipment. And that IDEX equipment includes things like incubators and reagent. The reagent in this case does something really cool. It takes the bacteria that are most likely to cause, or not, I'm gonna step back. It takes a bacteria like E. coli, which are not necessarily likely to cause illness, but which are an excellent proxy for those bacteria and viruses that do. So E. coli can make you sick, but if all E. coli made you sick, we'd all be sick right now. You'd all be very sad, and you probably wouldn't be at Mappy Hour drinking beer. E. coli is a proxy, and it's a better proxy than fecal coliform bacteria. It's a member of that larger group, and the larger group is cheaper and easier to test for, but different reagents like the one that IDEX has have made it really cost-effective to test for E. coli specifically. There's still some looseness in that. E. coli could come from birds, could come from beavers, could come from deer, fox, cats, anything that's a warm-blooded animal, bird or mammal. Warm-blooded animals have E. coli in their guts. All of them do. So if you find E. coli, it just means that there's been some kind of fecal contamination of that water source. But it's a much tighter correlation to human illness than it was with fecal coliform bacteria. So E. coli is currently the state of the art for monitoring water quality as far as primary contact, where your face is going to be in the water. So if you're likely to ingest a little bit of water by accident, you're swimming or otherwise getting water in your face the whole time that you're recreating. If you're on we were discussing this earlier, if you're on a stand-up paddleboard, sort of a gray area, don't fall. If you fall on the board. Kayaking, canoeing, you're going to get splashed. You'll have water in your hands, but be smart and don't rub it on your mouth. That's secondary contact. If you're in a motor vessel where you're not likely to come in contact with the water, but maybe by occasional splash or spray, that's tertiary contact. And each of those different types of contact carry different standards per the state that you're in. So EPA gives guidance on that. You can talk to a couple people here about that, like the one that giggled. DC follows EPA guidance. And so we have the exact same primary water quality contact standard that EPA recommends. Simultaneously, it is illegal to swim in any district body of water that's not a swimming pool. So you are not supposed to be swimming in Rock Creek, the Potomac, or the Anacostia River. Don't pan around, but quick show of hands, how many people have been swimming in any of the district's waterways? Keep those hands up if it was on purpose. All right. So people swim. We see people swim. As more and more people discover the district, as more and more people move into the district, as more and more people discover the Anacostia River, places like Yards Park, where our office is, and we run summer programs like Friday Night Fishing, The past 6 years now, we've been seeing people discovering the river, discovering that waterfront area, and discovering the fact that it's hot in D.C. in the summer, and they jump into the water. So people are rolling up in boats. They may not even live in D.C., but they're rolling up in boats for Friday night concerts, and they're having a couple beers, and they're deciding they're going to dive off the second story of their boat into the river, and then they're flipping burgers for everybody on board. And we haven't heard of anybody from those boats getting sick, but we haven't actually been able to row out to them and check. We know that people swim in Maryland and in D.C., even though it's illegal and has been since the 70s. What we want to do is let people know, first what we want to do most immediately is let people know when and where on the river the water quality is meeting standards. Secondly, we want to document all those instances where it is meeting the standards and hopefully document that it's happening more and more often. A lot of things have changed the past couple years with regards to how much bacteria is getting in the river. First off, how does bacteria get in the river? Sewage. It's poop in the water. DC is an old city by US standards. We have a combined sewer system. So the same big pipe that carries your sewage out of a toilet from your apartment, office, church, school, or other building with human habitation to Blue Plains wastewater treatment plant, which is still the biggest and most advanced wastewater treatment plant in the world, is the same big pipe for the middle oldest third of the district that carries all the storm drains. And when those storm drains hit, and now that everything is paved, remember it wasn't paved like that during Lincoln's era, which is when that sewer system was originally designed. Some of it was paved, but not like it is now. It's not all concrete and asphalt. Now that it is, every time it rains, past about 1/10 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch in an hour, that stormwater was too much for the sewer system, and it would overflow directly through combined sewer overflows. There were 19 of those on the Anacostia. There's a couple less now that have been separated and shut off. That system is still in place, but DC Water has been building a really big, really expensive tunnel. So this ceiling is about 9 feet, 10 feet, maybe 9 feet where I am and 10 feet over there. So more like the space from this wall to the window. The tunnel is that tall and that wide. It's a big tunnel, and it's miles long. And that's just the first leg of it. That got completed in March of last year. So we've not even seen an entire year of that tunnels being in operation, and it's already caught 4.5 billion with a B gallons of untreated human sewage and stormwater runoff. That's almost twice as much as it was predicted to capture because it was a record-breaking year for rainfall last year. We shattered the previous rainfall record by 10%. 6 inches doesn't sound like a lot, but to shatter a previous record from 100 years ago by 10% is significant. Last year was a crazy rainy year. And almost all of that rain happened from April and May through October and November. So that amount of stormwater was captured. There was still overflow, and there will still continue to be overflow, even in 4.5 years in 2023 when they finish the next section of the Anacostia Tunnel. There's still going to be some overflow. But it's literally magnitudes less than it used to be. That is how a lot of the bacteria is getting into the water. So because that tunnel is in place now, despite it being a record-breaking year for rainfall, we documented last year several times when several sites on the Anacostia would have been safe to swim had it been legal to swim, which is mind-blowing. Because people have been saying for decades, don't go near the water, don't go near the river, the Anacostia is dangerous, the Anacostia is dirty. And last year, despite record-breaking rainfall, several sites were actually would have been safe to swim had it been legal to swim. So that's part of why we're doing this big effort now. Patagonia funded us about $11,000 last year. The local store makes that choice. If you guys are in there, say hi for us. They do a grant program. They have their employees actually decide who's going to get what money locally. And they specifically funded us for the bacteria work. So the Maryland Sea Grant money got us the equipment we needed, the incubator, because it's bacteria, you have to incubate them for 24 hours before you can read the sample. There's not enough bacteria in a little 100 cc jar to count. You have to let them sit and grow. So we give them something they like to eat. And we put them in a nice, almost body temperature oven for 24 hours. And then you can read that sample. The sample reads two ways. It'll turn visually yellow if there's any kind of fecal coliform bacteria in it. So we gather not only the E. coli data, but also the fecal coliform data. What it is, it's a tray. So we take that little sample bottle. It's only about this big. After you go and scoop the water, that bottle goes on ice. Within 6 hours of that sample being taken, it has to be at the lab and being run. So because bacteria are living things, they do silly, naughty, ridiculous things when you're not looking. They might die off. They might have a party. There's no way to tell what they're doing. So within 6 hours of that sample being taken and being kept on ice, it needs to be in the lab being analyzed. And that minimizes the risk of either a catastrophe or a party in the bottle. That sits in the oven for 24 hours. And the next day, we read it. So what goes into the oven isn't the bottle. Into the bottle goes a reagent. We shake that reagent up, make sure it's dissolved. That reagent has food, which E. coli preferentially like. So it's helping isolate just the E. coli and trying to kill off anything else. And it's got chemicals that make them turn yellow in the presence of coliforms. And what's really cool is the black light. So part of the equipment we got to buy was a black light cabinet. It makes them fluoresce. So if there's E. coli in there, they will fluoresce under black light. So the sample gets poured from a bottle into a tray. The trays are only about that big. And they've got a series of wells in them, some of them large wells, and a lot of little tiny wells at the bottom. And the number of those wells that show a positive result, we line that up on a table, and that table gives us our result. So this is a statistical method, not just we're not actually wiping the colony on an agar plate and then counting colonies. So we're not getting colony forming units. What we're getting is most probable number of colony forming units. So statistical response, but it's been EPA certified for I think 20 years now. It's no longer a new technology, it's just getting a lot easier. And we are able to do all of this on a little table, half the size of this one. We had it in our office. We moved it to a second room just to make room for other gear and more people. But you can do all of this without access to anything other than a sink. And then for biohazard, we just run the samples through the autoclave at Gallaudet, and then that steams them clean, and they're just treated as trash. So it's incredibly easy sampling to do. You don't need a full lab. It's pretty amazing, this protocol, how many people can start doing this work. And you'll see it growing. If you look at Swim Guide now, that app that I talked about that you can download for free, hint, hint. And all of you look like people that probably have smartphones, but if you don't, it's also a website, swimguide.org. 2 years ago, you would have seen nothing in the bay. There were no Swim Guide sites in the bay. Just past 2 years ago, you would have seen our sites popping up on the Anacostia here and there. All of last year, you would have seen about 10 sites, of which 8 were actively monitored every other week for us, for Anacostia River. Now you'll see a bunch of sites in Baltimore. They just got their equipment, but they were doing it with a lab last year, sort of as a practice, kind of the way we did. And this is starting to grow. So it's becoming a much more accepted, much more used protocol. And it's making it a lot easier, a lot more democratic to do this kind of work. So it's really cool to watch this piece of the citizen science going. So the Citizen Science Press is this year. We were hoping to involve a lot of volunteers last year. We were able to do the 8 sites every other week, mostly with just staff. We had a few friends of friends, volunteers that came out on the boat with us to sample. But we got putting that up on Swim Guide got the attention of the District Department of Energy and Environment. So where we had a little bit of money from Patagonia and a little bit of money from Maryland Sea Grant, the district last summer gave us a $140,000 grant. And that's not just for the Anacostia, that's for the entire district. So they put a request for proposals out last spring. We won that request for proposals after we got their attention with the fact that we were putting this out publicly. For the record, the district has been taking this kind of data regularly at between 3 and 5 sites for years. And they don't hide it. It's not given to you on a platter like Swim Guide, but it's been public knowledge. It's just not been on a super shiny format. The district government didn't have an easy format for making this super publicly available. It was free and available to the public, but it wasn't easy to access. So the fact that we were putting it out in the public and we're getting so many hits, I forget how many thousands of hits we had on this just the first year, but it was lots of thousands of hits. That got their attention very quickly. So we put this proposal in, we won the RFP, so we're now working with Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay to conduct the trainings. Those trainings are going to be April 3rd and April 10th. The first two trainings, and as it just so happens, I have here a handy dandy sign-up sheet for water quality monitoring trainings. So if you guys want to pass this around, you give me a name and email and or a phone number. Email is definitely preferred, since a lot of the communications will be by email or digitally. The first two trainings are going to be April 3rd and April 10th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. They're deliberately on Wednesdays during the weekday. This is a happy hour. Most of you probably came from work. I'm sorry. Sign up anyway. We're going to do another training closer to summer. We're first pool of people we want to make sure that people are available mostly on weekdays. The reason being, when do y'all mostly recreate? Weekends. How long does it take me to incubate the bacteria?
24 hours.
24 hours. So if I want you to have information Saturday morning, preferably Friday evening, I need to have that data in hand Friday evening, which means I need to have samples in hand Thursday evening, preferably Thursday midday. So we're looking primarily for people that can sample Thursday morning, Thursday midday. We'll be doing Thursday night kayaking, so I'll be in the office or somebody will be in the office Thursday evening to receive those last straggler volunteers that bring us in samples. It is possible to sample after work. It's not dark until 8 in the summer. This sampling, the trainings, the first two are April 3rd and April 10th. The next training will be for people that want to come out mostly for the summer. That'll probably be in late May or early June. And the sampling itself is weekly. There's 22 sites across the district, Potomac, Rock Creek, and the Anacostia. Those 22 sites, instead of bi-weekly, now we're going to be monitoring weekly. So that's part of the reason why we're looking for volunteers. Is way more than we can do. Partly we want to get the citizen science component. We want to start building a pool of people and having a core of people that live in the district or work in the district or both that are engaging with the river in more than just, oh, we saw it from the bridge way, or for y'all, more than just I used the trail today way. You know, we want people to be engaging with the river and knowing a little bit more about it. So those trainings, specifically April 3rd and April 10th, are targeted at that group of people that can come out midday. In summer, we're expecting to have a totally different population, but the sampling will be May through September. So we are counting on having people that are really good for May and June, and people who are really good for July and August, and then some of those May, June people coming back for September, and then everything in between. If you have a flex schedule, great. If you want to do it before work, great. If you want to do it after work, great. So long as the team of people that are going out has been to one of the trainings that we offer, you're good to go. That way, that training will teach you how to scoop the water, you know, how to use the gloves, how to not interfere with the sample. You're going to be taking more than just bacteria. So one of the things that's adding to the district program beyond what we did last year, water temperature, pH, and turbidity. Turbidity is how cloudy the water is. Those are the other primary contact standards. So bacteria is the one that usually shuts down primary contact in the district. But those other qualities, pH, temperature, and turbidity, are also important standards for that. If the pH is ever bad, you're not going to want to be near the water. That's like acid coal mine drainage stuff that we mostly don't see here, but just in case, it is part of the standard, and it's one of the things that we're going to monitor. The other thing that we're going to be monitoring, and this you can do, you come to the training, but then this you can do on your own whenever, is a recreational use survey. And since all of you are people who have self-selected to be out doing recreational things, this is a spot where you guys will be particularly useful to us. The recreational use survey is there to document how people are using the waterway. So those people that swim, great. Document the fact that you went swimming. It can be anonymous. That's fine. How many people had their dogs in the river or in Rock Creek? Because then they wash their dog or they brush their dog and then they touch their face, and do they get sick or not? How many people were splashing through the river between trails? How many people were splashing with kids? How many people were near the water but not in it? How many people were kayaking, paddleboarding, whatever it is, that recreational use survey is there to kind of capture that data. And we're actually looking for people to do that not on Wednesdays, because as it turns out, on Wednesday and Thursday mornings, not a lot of people are recreating. There are some dog walkers. I was on the Rock Creek portion for our practice run with just the partners. We're working with Potomac Riverkeeper Network to handle the Potomac sites, Rock Creek Conservancy and Audubon Natural Society to handle the Rock Creek sites, and then Alliance for the Bay and Audubon Natural Society are kind of coming in for the trainings. So there's 5 of us that are on this grant. Anacostia Riverkeeper just received the grant from the district. But that grant is going to carry us through this year, and then hopefully the district will see fit to fund that going forward. But the more of y'all and your friends of friends that we can get out and sample, the better. One of our basic goals for this is to have someone from every single ward sampling. So if you have friends scattered across DC, please invite them. We got waterways all over DC. We want people from all over DC. What we envision it being is about a half day of work. We don't count on the same team sampling every single week either. We assume it'll probably be once or twice a month for most people. If you're able to sample every single week, great. If not, that's fine. But we want groups of 2, preferably 3 people going at a time, handling 5 or 6 of those sites. So we'll have 3 or 4 runs each week. Hopefully the groups will collaborate and make sure they're going out, or coordinate, make sure they're going out about the same time. So the data is fitting to the same weather. The data is weather dependent. So when it rains matters. That's part of why we want to do it right before the weekend instead of doing it on Sunday when you're recreating, so that you have that data for the following weekend. If it rains in that intervening 4 days, the data is moot. If it rains lightly, maybe it could educate something, but it's much better to be as close to the weekend when you're recreating as possible. Hands up for Q&A.
5 minutes.
For the temperature and pH testing, are you giving out like multimeters or songs, or how are you testing that?
Right now we've got physical thermometers and pH strips. We actually just wrote a grant to National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. We'll find out about that not till the end of summer, to expand into Maryland, and that would add dissolved oxygen and some more technical parameters, in which case we would get some multimeters. If you know of somebody that wants to give us multimeters, YSI has told us we get a discount, but not that we get things for free. But if you have friends at YSI or anywhere else, please let me know. But that is eventually where we're going to go. It adds sort of an extra layer of maintenance and volunteer management when you got a $3,000 piece of equipment floating around. But right now it's very, very basic. Hopefully we'll get a little more sophisticated as we move forward.
What about the turbidity?
Turbidity, we've got a turbidimeter in the lab. So you'll take a water sample for that, and then we'll check it at the lab, which is probably one of the most frustrating pieces of equipment in the world.
People fish from the Anacostia.
Oh, yeah.
Is it generally safe to eat the fish?
Nope.
Like if they're cooked, it's still not.
So cooking is great for bacteria.
Okay.
Cooking doesn't kill chemicals, for the most part. Some chemicals you can actually cook out, but mostly not. So that's actually a really common thing. When we do Friday night fishing, if anybody knows of anybody that wants to be a title sponsor for Friday night fishing, let me know. I need like a $12,000 sponsor. But I put them on a t-shirt that goes on 500 kids' backs for the entire summer, and it's good walk around forever marketing. We do Friday night fishing on purpose for that. We used to have that funded by Walmart. When Walmart stopped their plans for the 2 stores that they never opened in the district, they also ghosted on their previously agreed to funding obligations. So yay Walmart. But we do that on purpose, A, to introduce people to the river as a positive recreational point. Come down to the river, it's awesome. Hashtag come to the river. Please use that. Especially if you guys are the ones out recreating, you see something nice, do hashtag come to the river. There's another app you can use also for nice things, not just bad things, but you can also report pollution on Water Reporter. It's another cool free app that is out there. But no, fishing, DC has a fish consumption advisory, which from a technical standpoint is very good and very strong. Unfortunately, it counts on people having encountered it, read all of it, and believed it, and then chosen to follow it. How many of you knew there was a fish consumption advisory for DC? All right. 5 out of 40. How many of you read the whole thing? Yep. I got paid to, so I did. It is depending on how often you were to consume the fish, how you were to prep the fish, how you were to cook the fish, and which of the fish you were eating, some of the fish are safe to eat. But because most people don't deal with subtlety well, we just tell people not to eat the fish yet.
So the Friday night fishing, they throw the fish.
Strictly catch and release. Come recreate on the river, please don't eat the fish yet.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. I was just looking at the app and saw that Virginia, it looks like on the Shenandoah River, the state, or I guess the Commonwealth, is now controlling some of the water quality. Are you guys partnered with them, or are they gonna? Is there
So
a separate app to look at
water
the
keepers are
quality?
geographically laid out. So the Anacostia Riverkeeper is strictly the Anacostia watershed. So I'm the eastern half of DC. I am the south eastern chunk of Montgomery County and the northwestern chunk of Prince George's County. I believe Shenandoah Riverkeeper, who's housed under Potomac Riverkeeper Network, has been associated with that. There's a Friends of the Shenandoah that was associated with one of those sites. Did you find more than one or more than a couple?
It looks like there was just one, and then it said like.
And then sometimes those sites will be old, so it's hard to tell in the winter because most people are not monitoring in the winter. If you look at it comes late spring and it's still faded. So on the app for Swim Guide, a bright green or a bright red means that it's been in the past week that data was taken for that point. If it's faded, it becomes a historical average. So if you see faded green, yellow, or red, that's a historical average. And you need to check on that site to see if it's current, even remotely current data. But a lot of the time, like so in North Carolina, the state does some of that water quality monitoring. So a lot of the coastal pins that you'll see in North Carolina, those are actually state or county sites where the local agency or the state agency is doing the monitoring. Swim Guide has a preference for water keepers because they came out of a water keeper movement, but they're not tied to just water keepers or even just nonprofits. So they can be any group, whether it's agency, nonprofit, or whatever. So long as they've been through sort of a training session with them, that's totally good, and they'll be on that site. In the back?
Yeah, so you're covering bacterial pollution with this work. What needs to be done for, you mentioned chemicals, and then also if there's any agricultural runoff and algal blooms that are associated with that, are both of those things just a small percentage of the pollution problem, or?
It depends on where you are. So for the Anacostia, the chemicals are mostly legacy. There's old dumps that are pre-1970s, so they're not sealed at all, and they're full of pre-1970s trash, which has things like PCBs and all the metals. Washington Gas, which is now, Alta Gas, used to be Washington Coal, Gas, and Light, and right on the river above the North 11th Street Bridge, they used to press and cook coal to create coal gas for lighting and cooking. So that they had coal on site, then they cooked it on site, then they had the leftovers on site. There's a lot of contamination, fossil fuel contamination there. Everything in the district and the East Coast burned coal for a couple hundred years. But there's a lot of different sources. There's actually an Anacostia River Sediment Project. If you go to DOEE's website, doee.dc.gov, and you search Anacostia River Sediment Project, that'll pop up a whole administrative record of documents. If you're interested in that, please follow up with me later. Right now, the district is still supposedly on track for an end of 2019 deadline set by district council in order to force their hand on having a remedial investigation done. So the RI, the remedial investigation, is how much of what is where and how bad could it be for us in the environment. That's mostly done, but it's not published yet. They're waiting on some background data from Park Service and a couple other agencies that did last-minute data additions to satisfy some of our comments. They've pushed that back by like 4 months, which was not something we expected or were pleased by, but it doesn't necessarily push off the deadline of this end of this year for a record of decision. In between now and then, they still have to have and publish a feasibility study. So the RI is how much of what is where, how much of these toxic chemicals are where in the river, and how bad could it be for us in the environment. The FS, the feasibility study, is okay, great. Knowing that, how do we clean it up and prevent it from causing human and environmental health damage? And then after that, and so the FS selects a remedial option. Then after that, who pays for it? Who pays for it is worked in, kind of, but technically it's not supposed to be worked in until at the end. So the ROD, the Record of Decision, is the legally binding instrument. That's what the district council deadline is for. It was the end of last year was the deadline. Became clear a year and a half ago that DOE wasn't going to meet that deadline. It's still on track to be one of the fastest assessments of its scope in the history of the country since we've had these kind of laws. So we, the environmental community, about 20 different nonprofits had done the original advocacy in 2014 to get the money put into the 2015 and hence capital budget for the district to fund the study. So the district is funding the study. I think they're about $25 million in right now. So this is not a cheap thing. We persuaded them to do that, and that got the ball rolling. And so we agreed as a community to promote and to testify in favor of their deadline extension to the end of this year. I can't speak for everybody, but most of us, I think, informally, off record, are not going to support another extension, not without pretty drastically changing data that comes out of these kind of intermediate studies. So we expect them to still hit that deadline this year. That will then lead to a cleanup being chosen, the remedial option. Then it'll go out for bid. Then it'll start. You would expect a cleanup to actually physically begin 2021, 2022 probably, and then allowing the ecosystem to kind of recalibrate, new sediment to fill in, fish to die out, new fish to recruit. We wouldn't expect fishable in terms of eating whatever you catch without concern for another 10 years or so, and that's totally a loose number. But the ball is rolling. There is an official deadline, legally binding deadline, so it's moving forward. But for the chemicals, that's kind of the approach that we have to take here, and we're very heavily reliant on that. Individual sites like the Navy Yard, Pepco's Benning Road site, Washington Gas site, they all have their own landside consent decrees, these legally binding documents. They've had their own studies, their own remedial options chosen. So the toxics is very complicated, but it's moving, and almost all of it is kind of locked into a sort of a legal framework.
We have time for about one more question, and then we're going to break out after this.
I was going to ask about swimming. Like National Harbor, they have like organized swimming for pre-triathlons, and then like the nation's try swims in the Potomac unless it gets canceled, which is 50% of the time because of EPA water quality.
And that race is no more.
Yeah, that race got canceled.
it's dead?
Yeah.
Oh.
Really?
Yeah.
But they're doing like escape
So-
triathlon,
No.
right?
It's
National Harbor is
Schedule.
not the
That's
district
All right.
and is not subject to district water quality standards.
Okay.
National Harbor is also fed primarily by water that comes from the Potomac and then back out. It is dangerously close to the outflow at Blue Plains. Blue Plains I don't have a good handle on their effluent numbers for bacteria. I know that they struggle sometimes with nutrient effluent from Blue Plains. DC Water is actively suing EPA to try to reduce the limit, to relax the limit on bacteria in the Anacostia River. Sort of related to CSO, sort of related to Blue Plains. So Blue Plains is on the Potomac. That effluent goes to the Potomac, but the Potomac is tidal up to Great Falls. The Anacostia is tidal 8.5 miles from Haynes Point all the way up to Bladensburg. So what is in the Potomac during not a storm event will be up the Anacostia on the next high tide. But does that kind of get to what you were thinking?
All right, guys. Well, thank you, Trey. We're going to break out into a couple of groups, and I think Trey's
Where do you want me to be?
You can hang out right here if you want. If you guys have more questions, he's clearly very knowledgeable about all things Anacostia. Kate and Alex will be over on the couch over there talking about Anacostia trails for biking, running, and whatnot. And then I think Sarah is going to be somewhere talking about
Water sports.
water sports.
Yep.
Water sports on the Anacostia and the Potomac. I'll be up here for the Anacostia boat tour with the Watershed Society. If you guys want to sign up, we have 4 months, May, June, July, and we have 20 spots, so get them while they're hot.